What's up, everybody? Yeah, I'm back. 2 years later. Alright, today is going to be a true canon video that also doubles as the Jesus notes for Earth 1 Superman. All three. Let's begin. Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying that this story is very much a coming-of-age story. We're watching this kid grow into the man he becomes, the Superman he becomes. Get it? One of the verses that really was put onto my heart during this and made me think of during this was John 15:19. It says, "If you belonged to this world, it would not love you as its own. As it is, you did not belong to this world, but I have chosen you out of the world. This is why the world hates you." Now, I'm going to step back and tell you why. That it really makes sense. I really don't need to step back and tell you why, but taking a look at these books right here, you got Earth 1, Volume 1, Earth 2, Volume 2, and Earth 3, Volume 3 of Superman. Yes, this was a very long storyline, but it was a very good one, and it really punches that point throughout all of it. You know, you are not of this world. They do not like you because of it, and that's really the point. Throughout this whole thing, you're watching him grow into the man he becomes. He stops a dictatorship. He fights aliens from outer space. And then he has to fight his own uncle, in this case. His uncle is General Zod from the main DC universe. They're not related in the main DC universe, but they're related here. In fact, he is Jor-El's brother in this reality. And throughout all of this, you watch it, and the world is constantly being, we need to have a way to stop Superman if he ever turns on us, because we don't really know his intentions. He's brand new to this world. He's not one of us, and he says he just wants to help, but there's no way of telling. In fact, Lex Luthor and his wife Alexandra create this beam that would shoot red sun at him in case of this emergency. And of course it's used. It's that rule. If there's a gun on the table in a movie, you know that gun is going to be used. And in this case, Alexandra and Lex Luthor use their weapon to disable both Superman and General Zod. Of course, Lex dies fighting, but what can you do? And of course, Alexandra takes up the name Lex and becomes the Lex Luthor we all know and hate to love. But that was one of the verses that came into my head and to my heart. Again, John 15:19. "If you belong to this world, it would not love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong of this world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you." And that is a really poignant punch point. There's also the idea of, his journey. I have Matthew 3 right here, and I'm going to read verse 3:17 of Matthew. It says, "And there came a voice from the heaven, 'This is my beloved Son, I take delight in him.' Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil." Now, You might be thinking, why does this have anything to do with it? Why would that verse be prudent in this case? Why do I even bring it up? Well, it's simple, because he gets the Fortress of Solitude. And most of the time, in most of the what's it called? Most of the universes, Jor-El is the voice speaking. Of course, it's not the case here in this universe, but it's still a Fortress of Solitude moment. Having that time to connect and realize who his parents were, because he did have a vision of sorts bombard him with the memory and what happened the last days of Krypton. Of course, the origin story is different from the usual, where it just blows up because the sun's too hot or the core isn't stable. In this case, General Zod paid some other aliens to blow it up. But that's not really the point. The point is, it's one of those moments where he realizes who he is, and he is led into a battle that could be argued isn't his own, but at the same time is his own. In the first one, it's definitely his own. The second one, not so much, but he takes part in it because it is something that is harming his own planet, the planet he was raised on, being Earth, and Parasite not being such a nice guy, in fact, being kind of a serial killer. He killed a lot of people as Parasite. He killed one of his allies as Ray, and he bit a kid's ear off in his past. So, not really a nice guy, and he's led in, and Superman is led into this war, into this battle. That's really what I thought of in that moment. I thought of this. And of course it's not that moment because it's the entire story, but it was something that was brought to my attention, especially the first time he walked into the Fortress of Solitude. It doesn't bring up the fact that it's Jor-El. In fact, we are led to believe that it is in fact not Jor-El. It's just a download of intelligence given by the Kryptonians. But in my heart, it will always be Jor-El, and therefore it will always be connected to the spirit and the voice of God. Both in the original storyline and this storyline, Superman is very much an analog of Jesus. Not so much closer to Jesus in this one, because he does not have that whole son of a god act or routine that most of the stories do, but I would more akin him in this story, similar to how I did on the podcast in the American Alien storyline. I would akin him to David, because he does have a temper. He's not 100% pure. He, in the main storyline, in the main stories, not the storyline, this is the storyline. In the main comics universe, Superman is much more of a Jesus figure because he has less problems, if you would say. He's an alien among men, and he is fighting to be like, but also not like. He wants to keep his feelings and stuff not bottled, but in check, so that he can be the best he can be. Here, he has a little bit of a hard time doing with it. He, again, overthrows the government, and, you know, we get the whole David and Goliath storyline. I would view that as, because he easily took down a giant thing, and he could have easily not have done it just as he did it. In fact, the first time he went, he was like, okay, fine, I'll let you be, but he did overthrow it, seeing that it was the right thing to do in this case. He let his feelings get the best of him, and he probably didn't do it in the right way. He could have gone along with a certain path a certain way to get it done, but he did, and it was all for the better. But again, he isn't really perfect. Throughout this story, I would say that Superman has a hard time resting, if you will. It's one of those things where he has to fight constantly. He wants to be normal, but he really doesn't know how. It's something that has plagued him his whole life. In fact, throughout his childhood, he was bullied for being the straight A student, but he didn't want to be bullied. He didn't want to be noticed like that, so he slipped his grades from an A to a C in all classes. And I would really think of the verse Matthew 11:28 and 29. It says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul." Now, again, it's not Jor-El in the fortress, but for the sake of it, I feel like I'm going to continue calling it Jor-El just for the fact that it's always been. The fortress really is his only connection to Krypton, and I see it like that. And the fact that he is unable to rest because of all this stuff really brought that to my heart, because he really can kind of relax and rest learning from it. There's a moment in here where he's just sitting there listening to what that thing has to say to him. And I would view that as a restful moment. If anything, it's just powerful. There are other moments in the book, such as when he's talking to his father, his actual adoptive father, Jonathan Kent. It's a flashback because by the time this book actually begins, Jonathan is long dead. But he talks to him, and I can't remember quite what he said, but I know it has to do with the Bible, because he actually says to Clark, that's what the Bible says for us to do. Essentially just saying, like, we have our goal, but you can rest as long as you don't forget who you are and what you're doing. And that's really what it is. Again, I'm going to read the verse. Matthew 11:28 and 29. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me. As for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." It's really something Superman is going to learn throughout this whole thing. He's got a girlfriend now, kind of. I mean, they did profess their love for each other, but it's really still up in the air. I think it's still, but regardless, he's gonna have to learn how to rest. And since this girl, her name is Lisa, now knows that he is Superman, he has somebody who actually can help him through this and is willing to help him through this. And those are the things in this book that really make me think of the scriptures and what the scriptures have to say and how they parallel. These series will continue now that the podcast is doing Jesus Notes. For the people who are from the Jesus Notes on my podcast, hi and welcome to the Agent Blue channel. I should have welcomed you in the beginning of this, but I completely forgot. But thank you for being here, and this is where the Jesus Notes will reside from now on, because it is really difficult to just try to type them all out at this point, due to the fact that I'm writing an essay for college and trying to do all this stuff, so I do apologize. But I'm not stopping in any means, in any way. Why would I ever stop this? This is the most important part of the podcast, if you ask me, because it's really what it's about, bringing the gospel to you in a way that you might better understand if you read comics. That's the whole point of this YouTube channel and the whole point of the podcast. So I figured I had this channel, and it may have been a few years, but let's get it all in here, you know? And so that's it for today's Jesus Notes and True Canon video. See y'all next week. Peace.